is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me as always are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are heading into the end of a month, heading into a new month. Obviously, the league action is about to start across Europe with the World Cup in mind, starting in a few months. Obviously, we're coming here in a bit of a somber note, actually, as we are recording just a mere 12 hours after Paraguay's loss to Argentina in the Copa America Femenina third place match, which means that they will be playing in the intercontinental playoffs to qualify for the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. We'll also talk about what's going on in the league action, as it already started a couple weeks ago, as well as the Copa Paraguay, to see what teams are really giving importance to what competition, and talk further on that. But before we get my co-host in, obviously we have to give our thoughts and prayers to the loss of Roberto Rojas, a very famous Paraguayan journalist, someone who fought for freedom of press and expression, someone that really fought during the Stroessner years when Paraguay was under dictatorship. Very much respected, very much someone that was a giant in Paraguayan journalism and media as a whole. He died a couple of days ago at the age of 87, and was a big Guarani fan as well. So obviously our thoughts and prayers go to the Rubin family. And, I don't want to start on a somber note, guys, more so than we're already going to today, but let me get my co-host in here, because Fede, obviously you have some memories of Humberto that we spoke about, off the air in our WhatsApp group. Obviously it's a big loss for a giant. I guess that's the right word that we can say, a giant in Paraguayan journalism.
Yeah, obviously when he was on his top of game, right? When he was like on his best moment, he was doing so much. He was doing TV, he was doing radio, he was doing like the biggest interviews in the country. Everybody was trying to at least hear part of his program, his show in the mornings. I mean, he was doing so much. I remember when I came here to Paraguay, he was so big, and I got to work with him. Yeah, I got to work in his empire actually, part of his empire, because he had several radio stations. One where he actually worked at, which was Radio Nyanduti, which is an IMA, and he has his show there. He worked pretty much all day. He was the first one in the building, getting there at 5:30 in the morning. And I actually had a radio show a couple of years ago, really early in the morning, also at 6 o'clock. Actually, I would get on the air, and he was there always before me, reading the newspapers, getting his stuff ready. And this is somebody that was 70 something years old, and he was already done. I mean, he didn't even have to be there. He could be at his house, and he was already starting to be sick, but he wanted to work. He was a big example for everybody, not only where he worked, but for other people that listened to him. A lot of people looked up to him, and there's a big legacy behind everything that Roberto Rubin did. So yeah, it was a big loss. I was at his funeral these last couple of days. So yeah, it was a sad week, but it's those weeks that where you think also how big he was, everything he did, and everything that we need to keep on doing, right? We're also part of this world. We're also part of the press here in Paraguay, and I'm part of where he worked, and there's a big legacy behind it. And it's just beautiful to talk about him and everything that he did. But I heard that somebody had a really close story to him, and I want to hear Ralph's story, because that was a top. I had a couple of chats with him on the hallway. Sometimes he would even make fun of me, Humberto, with his humor, his style. But Ralph got close to him, and in a special way.
Wow. Yeah, yes, in a way it's hard to be sad, because whenever you think of Humberto, there's such good stories behind him, like Fede's remembering, and he had this great sense of humor and larger than life character. And well, the first time I met him was what I thought was a phone call when I was in London, because he actually organized the world's biggest barbecue, the largest asado, in Paraguay in 2008, and through my job at Guinness World Records, we had a phone call because I was saying I should go over there to Paraguay because I knew Paraguay, etc. And he was like, yeah, you should definitely come, and all this kind of stuff. And it was only towards the end of the phone conversation I realized we're live on radio. So it was like, oh, well, then I'm definitely having to go to Paraguay, because it's just been announced live on one of the biggest radio stations in the country. And so that's how I first met him. And it was really thanks to that I got to go back to Paraguay when I wasn't expecting. And I think if that hadn't have happened, maybe I wouldn't be married today to my wife who's in Paraguay, because we met up on that trip. So I have a lot of things to thank Humberto for. And he was a huge influence, like you were saying, and through his family as well. So I'm good friends with his grandson, Tobias. We worked together on the radio where Fede is talking about. We used to do rock and pop in the mornings. And that was also through his Humberto's son, Tobias' dad, Leo, as well, who was kind of putting that team together. We're a young group of people doing Paraguayan football on Sunday mornings. So he was just such a big character and a big influence. And it's very apt that they've named one of the biggest parks in Paraguay, Parque Ñuguazú, is now going to be named after him. And that's very appropriate from my memory, because that was actually the last time I saw him before I left to go to Miami. I used to like to go and run in that park in the mornings, and there he was walking through. Again, he must have been in his 80s by then, but he was still doing his morning walk through Ñuguazú, because he committed a lot to the environment when, I think, in Paraguay, climate change and looking after the environment wasn't really a big topic at the time, but he began a campaign. I don't know how to say it in English, but kind of, well, all the lungs, I suppose, all the lungs for Paraguay, I guess it would translate as. He began that, and so that's a great legacy. I think that Parque Ñuguazú will now be remembered as Parque Ñuguazú Humberto Rubin, which is a great legacy.
Absolutely a big legacy that he is giving upon to all of us. A big Guarani fan as well. Obviously, very much someone that was remembered even on their Twitter account when he died. So obviously, our thoughts and prayers go again to the Humberto Rubin family, and that's, obviously his legacy will always be remembered forever. As we switch gears now to something a bit more somber as well, heading into the Copa America Femenina. Obviously, this was a competition that had started when we last spoke. In a way, we kind of felt a bit optimistic. We were talking, I think, right after the game against Bolivia, the third game for Paraguay, where they won 2-0 and ended up playing 3 more games that would ensure their future. They beat Ecuador in the final game of the group stage, where they were winning 1-0, but then equalized only to get a winner from Lice Chamorro in the 91st minute, which put them and set them up into really a difficult match against Brazil in the semifinals. But this was a Brazil side that had not scored more than 3 goals this year, has not conceded a single goal yet. And they ended up losing 2-0 on the night, which means they had to play a third place match against Argentina in a game that was very, very contested over there in Armenia. Paraguay then took the lead early on in the 39th minute from an own goal from Romina Nunez, before falling apart in the last 10 minutes with goals from Yamila Rodriguez and Florencia Bonsegundo. So, which means that Paraguay will be playing in the Interconfederation playoff. They will be joined alongside Chile and other teams such as Chinese Taipei, Thailand, Cameroon, Senegal, Haiti, Panama, Papua New Guinea, and the lowest ranked winner of the UEFA playoffs that will begin also later this year. So, Ralph, I'll go to you on this one first, because I think, it's difficult to really assess it, especially 12 hours removed from this game. Obviously, a lot of expectation, a lot of chat was given to this Paraguay team for things that happened off the pitch, but just from a football perspective, I think it was really disappointing to see Paraguay go out in the way that they did, and now they face off in really a bigger mountain to climb to go and qualify for their first ever World Cup.
Yeah, it's strange though, because I would say in a way they became, throughout the tournament, they become victims of their own success, because if you looked at it on paper before the tournament, they were the 5th ranked team in CONMEBOL. They've ended up finishing 4th, and Chile 5th, so they just inverted those 2 teams. So in a way, they've slightly outperformed expectation. I think we also knew they would never beat Brazil, and actually only losing 2-0 to Brazil in a way was a great result, I thought, because it set them up very well for the Argentina match. If they'd been totally blown out by Brazil, maybe they would have been a bit downhearted, but I think they went into Argentina knowing they had a chance. But this is where I suppose the feeling of disappointment comes in, is that they gave Argentina the game and they were winning right up until the end. So there was this feeling that they were going to the World Cup. They were, well, I guess 10, 12 minutes away, because they were still leading going right into the end of the game. And then that kind of capitulation was really such a sad thing to see when they worked so hard. And I think what you've seen is maybe a team that you saw all of that, the whole process, right? From losing very badly to Japan and then the US, and then starting to show a bit of fight in some pre-tournament friendlies, because they did okay against Uruguay and Ecuador. You felt, and then it was building up. The game against Chile that they won, you thought, wow, now they're starting to look good. And they were just 10 minutes away. So I guess the big job for Marcelo Frigerio now is to build them up again. He's got until February to really try and keep this group together, maybe add in a few players. Carrie Vega will be back from injury. Remember, we interviewed her a while back on this show. That's a person that could even go straight into the team. She's a very experienced player, well known, and could be useful in those games. But I think it's for the coach to kind of keep them together and not lose some of that momentum just because of these last 10 minutes. It reminds me a lot, actually, just switching to the men's game quickly, it reminds me a lot of Guarani last season, because last year, because Guarani did really well in the Clausura. They should have won it, and they lost it all in about 10 minutes, or even less, in about 5 minutes. And again, in perspective, Guarani had a brilliant season, but because of the way it finished, they were very disappointed. And that hangover lasted really the whole of the Apertura. And that's what Paraguay can't afford here. They can't go into the Interconfederation playoffs kind of downbeat about this result. They have to see about what they've achieved and how they've got to until now. And yeah, it's there's been some really impressive players. Everybody kind of knew about Jessica Martinez, those that follow women's football. But I think we saw some great performances around the pitch. I mean, I really like Limpia Freitas, Lise Chamorro when she came on. They've really built like a kind of a good side there. I suppose what they're lacking, and maybe Fede can correct me on this, or maybe he agrees, is I think it's just that kind of defensive organization, because you saw it at the end. Even at the end, they were pushing so high, even though they were 1-0 up, playing a high line, and maybe they just needed a bit more of that kind of organization and end game mentality, I suppose, to see out the match.
I think we need a lot of things still, Ralph. Yeah, we did take a step forward. That was very nice to hear from you. That we were probably on a 5th place before this tournament, and we ended up in the 4th spot, which is a little bit better. But we were so close to it that it's heartbreaking, right? And you could see it in the girls. I mean, you were winning this match, this crucial match, and from the first moment, you could see that it was special for them, just the way they played, with the temper, fighting again with the garra, like Maria likes to say. I think a lot of people like that about this national team, that you could see that the girls were really putting their hearts out there, trying to make it happen. Obviously, we don't have the best players in the world. We don't have what Colombia have. We don't have the kind of league that Brazil has. We're not even close to the kind of league, professional-wise, that Argentina and Chile have. But we're fighting with them. Why? Because we have players in Europe. Why? Because we have players in their leagues also. We have players in Colombia. We have players in Brazil. So we have players that have gained that experience and that have been playing together under the 17th, under the 20th. They've been playing together for a while, so they know each other pretty well. That's actually very important. Play with each other for several years. That's the kind of group that this coach found, a Brazilian coach that had managed before teams that had gone to the World Cup. That's why they went after this coach that almost took us to the World Cup. He's going to have a rematch, but hey, he was very close to it. But I did not like the way that he coached it in certain ways. He didn't use most of his players. There were a lot of players on this squad that I think could have gotten more game time. And the rotation on that game against Brazil was not that well. I thought that was a game that you were expecting for Paraguay to have problems. And, while they stayed in the game, the coach did not change that much. And you could see that players were already tired, and you had the Argentina game so close again. You had, what, three days only to rest. And yesterday after the game, after we lost against Argentina, and the chance to go directly to the World Cup, you could hear Pilar Martinez, Jessica Martinez say they were tired. You could see it in her game also. I mean, that's her star, and she was tired. Every time she got the ball, she couldn't beat her opponent on one-on-one. So yeah, it was shameful to see our girls in that way, Roberto, also, and not being on their top shape for the most important and crucial match. And unfortunately, it has been that way. This is a short tournament, so you have to be not only on your top game, but you have to have the girls on the best form. And I don't think Paraguay had that, but it was also part of the coach's job, to have girls alternatives and obviously use them in this game against Argentina. He started putting subs in after they scored on us, after they tied us, and after we were losing 2-1, and it was already late. You could see that the team was melting down, and they had pretty much nothing to fight for it on those last minutes. And yeah, unfortunately, we do end up on the 4th place, but hey, we're building up, right? I do think that the women's game is catching people's eye here in Paraguay, and they do it with results. They do it when they win, right? When they lose, they also catch people's eyes, and people criticize them. They talk about them, but hey, as long as they talk about them, I'm happy about it, because people are discussing the situation. They're discussing how much they're making. They're discussing equal rights, and hey, that's what we got to get to, Roberto. We got to get these girls into almost what the guys are making here, almost what the men are making here in Paraguay, just so they can be professional, and we can expect something out of them also in these kind of tournaments. Hey, 4th place is not bad. It was pretty much what I was expecting, actually.
It really is dependent on how you view success. I think it is very much a drastic change than what we saw in many years, and I didn't expect it for sure. I knew that we had talent, but I didn't expect them to really be in the position that they were in, maybe at the start of the tournament or even before that, after their games against Japan and
which one was the team that we beat? We beat Ecuador and we beat Chile,
which is good. And two teams that went to the last 2 World Cups, if you remember. So yeah, there is that significant progress, but now I think there is that sort of mental thing, I would say. This is not just in the women's game, but also in the men's game as well. It's like conforming with being able to be too comfortable, and being able to be too comfortable means getting these results like this. So we'll see what happens. I mean, Ralph, the challenge lies ahead into this big playoff spot, because it's going to be difficult. It really is going to be difficult to bring in this side, but I think Marcelo has really found a team that he can keep the base with. And so I think it could be something that he just needs to work with in the next few months.
Yeah, yes and no with the intercontinental playoffs, because it depends, right? I was looking, the way they structure it's kind of strange. They will give the top 4 places to the highest ranked in the FIFA rankings. And so that's going to mean that actually Chile, who finished below Paraguay in the Copa America, will be seeded and Paraguay won't, because we can assume that the team that comes in from Europe will be higher than 50th, which is where Paraguay are. So if Paraguay, and then you can't be drawn with a team from your confederation, right? So the route that Chile will take, Paraguay have to take a different route. If Paraguay go into Group A, which we will assume is with the European team, they will have a playoff game against another unseeded side, and then they have to go against the European team, which could be pretty difficult. But if they're in C and they end up playing some of the other unseeded teams, I think I was looking, they would get, the most likely is they get the AFC team, so Chinese Taipei or Thailand. I would still give them a chance. I would give them a shot against one of those two. Again, against Cameroon, Senegal, Haiti, Panama, all of that kind of level is around Paraguay's level. So it's not impossible. What I'm worried about is how well do the APF prepare, right? Because they got to go to New Zealand. It's a long way. The idea is that New Zealand themselves, as the kind of host, even though they're not there, they're going to play some friendlies as well with the teams in the intercontinental playoffs. So the idea is to be there quite a long time, and that's what they will need, because you're going to have to acclimatize. It's a long journey, and so we need that the APF put everything behind that to make sure they take the the girls in the best shape they can be. They put them in the best hotel and facilities that they can have. Because if they do this kind of at half measures, then they're going to be on the back foot against some of these other teams we're talking about. And the other thing is, what do we do in this meantime? Like I was saying, a lot of now the girls are going back to their clubs, and like Fede said, they're scattered all over Europe and South America. So how do we try and get them together? What kind of friendlies are going to be played in the meantime? What quality of opposition will they play? So that's something to really look at. But depending on the draw, I think they still have a shot at this.
Yeah, they definitely do, and we'll definitely see what happens to this side moving forward as we keep our eye on them and switch gears. Now it's the local league as we switch gears to see what's been going on over there. Obviously, the first few matches of the Clausura season has begun, with Nacional currently top of the league with 10 points, followed by Cerro Porteño, the only unbeaten side, alongside Resistencia with 9 points. The teams that we had predicted are not having the best of starts. Olimpia in fourth with 2 wins and 1 loss, and Libertad only 1 win and 2 losses out of 3 games. So, Fede, I mean, going to you on this one, it's been an interesting start to the season, you would say, but you would think that, and this is obviously correlating into the Copa Paraguay, where a lot of these teams will also be participating in this competition, that we kind of know where the priority is going to stand. And I think those big teams are going to start to really bounce back and really move forward in the league.
Yeah, the start of this Clausura is actually pretty wild in my way of seeing it. We had the last champion already lose 2 games out of 3 or 4. I mean, Libertad has been the big surprise, I would say. Seeing the big champion lose games against the smaller clubs was a big surprise, I believe, to a lot of people. And you're seeing a good start from Cerro Porteño. You're seeing a good start from Nacional, especially, who are keeping their run up, winning and winning. And they've only tied 1, but they won 3 games so far out of 4. So look, I think it's been a really good start of the season, especially seeing that clubs like Ameliano, General Caballero from Juan León Mallorquín, Guaireña, Resistencia, they're all making a fight for it. They're all making it hard for the big teams. So we could have big surprises in this Clausura, especially when you have relegation points being so important right now, right? You have Tacuarí there. In the worst position, they would go to the 2nd division right now. But then you also have other teams like Ameliano who need to start winning. Even though they play really well, they need to start winning because it's going to be really hard for them to stay in this 1st division. And then you have Sol America that can't get their eyes out of that situation either. And General Caballero also. So you have teams that know their reality right now, ending the year. So there's way more at stake. And I'm really seeing Cerro Porteño coming in hot this season. I see players that are getting into this team and that are doing a good job. So in my eyes, Cerro Porteño looks very focused into trying to get in this 2nd trophy that really got away from them. They made more than 50 points in the Apertura, but Libertad just made a little bit more, Ralph.
Yeah, now with Libertad losing those 2 games, which you mentioned, and Cerro winning all of them in the acumulativo, so who gets the most points over the whole year, Cerro only 1 behind Libertad now, all of a sudden. It's been a really surprising start for me, though, from Cerro, because the goals are coming, but the goals are coming from different sources. So they had like a last-minute winner from Damian Boadilla. Pachi Carrizo is back in Cerro, and he had some personal issues before, but now he's playing and he scored this amazing goal from the halfway line, which people should go and check out, because that was a fantastic strike. I think Marcelo Martins has got 1 goal, but then Alfio Oviedo, who we saw at the end of the season, hasn't scored yet. Brian Samudio, the new signing, hasn't got a goal. They're still waiting. I don't think Fernando Romero's got much time yet. They're still waiting for Morales to come back. So it's interesting that they're getting the results, but not maybe as we would have expected them. They've let 1 player go, Alan Benitez, who's gone to MLS. It looks like the other fullback, Alan Rodriguez, could be off as well. but they have cover there. They brought in cover at left back from Sol de America, and they brought in at right back. They always had Espinola, so I think they kind of feel those were positions they were okay to let people go. So it looks like they can launch a fight. I would still say, I did say in the preview about Olimpia, we should still watch out for Olimpia. They did lose their game against Libertad, but they're looking very strong against all the other teams. They seem to always have enough against the so-called smaller teams. And they're in a similar position to Cerro, that they have Derlis Gonzalez, but then the goals are just coming from different places and they're trying new players. They've been gave a debut to someone called Aaron Paez last week. And they've been using some young players. And so it's very interesting to see that these teams are starting to use new players, but still getting the results. And then finally on Nacional, great start. Pedro Saravia has won the league before. So that's a coach that knows what to do and how to take teams through. And he seems to have got them really much more organized after they kind of let things slip towards the start of the year. So that if they keep Facundo Bruera, which I think now we're in July, end of July, so I think all the transfer windows are closing, because there was a chance he was going to like Czech Republic or something, I think I heard. Assuming they keep Facundo Bruera and they brought in this kid Francisco Morel, who looks very good at 18, they could maybe go. We'll see how long they can go into the season. I don't think they can win the league, but I think they can keep it interesting with away from the traditional big teams.
I just wanted to mention that Cerro Porteño is still the hottest ticket around. They're gonna play in Ciudad del Este for the first time, I think, since the pandemic hit. They're gonna play there after a while. What, 3 years? Rob, it's been a while since they played outside of Asunción. And lately when you went to Cerro Porteño home games, there wasn't that many people. It wasn't packed. That feeling that the stadium was brand new had gone away. So it's very good to see the big teams go back to the countryside, go play in Ciudad del Este. Those are people that they usually don't get a chance to see the big teams, Roberto. And it's nice to see the stands full again, like we're going to see this weekend when Cerro Porteño plays Ameliano, which is the team that's taking Cerro Porteño to Ciudad del Este, a city right by Brazil.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely is a demonstration of them being El Club del Pueblo, that the team of the people. So I think it definitely is a demonstration of how popular the team is across the country. And so they definitely need that support and definitely allow them to really bounce back to getting back to winning ways in the league.
And let me just make a point to what Ralph was saying. The under-19 rule is being a problem for certain teams. They're not finding the right guy. He talked about Olympia's situation. I think Cerro Porteño does not have that problem with Fernando Ovelar. He's been pretty much man of the match in 2 out of the 3 games that he's been playing on. So I'm looking into him as one of the potential stars of this tournament. Hey, one of these kids could be the surprise, and you need him there. You got to give him minutes, because it's an obligation in this tournament to give them minutes. So you got to make him play, and Cerro Porteño is making him play, and I think he's going to end up playing, not just because you have to make him play, but because he's making the difference in that midfield, Ralph. And that's something they needed, because they're not really only on top of Claudio Aquino. They could use Ovelar. Now they got Pachi Aquino. They got more players to build football around the strikers, I believe. That's why I'm putting my eyes on Cerro Porteño right now. I think they're looking really good in the start of the season.
Yeah, that's a good point you make about the more creativity, because there was like a bit of a what's the word, like a reliance on Claudio Aquino, and it was like, if Aquino's good, Cerro's good. If Aquino's not good, then they're struggling. But now they have a few more options, especially with Pachi, and Ovelar is that player that for those that remember, he scored in the Superclásico aged 14, and he's still so young. You forget that he still qualifies for the under-19s, because it seems like he's been around forever. One interesting point on the under-19s is that Tacuary have actually been using the most youngsters, which I didn't expect at all. They've been using up all the minutes. It's not working for them at the moment. They're yet to score a goal, so therefore obviously haven't won a game. But it's good to see that some of the smaller teams were using the rule properly and not what we had seen in previous tournaments when players would play for like 15 minutes and be taken off after the first 15 minutes. This has helped, I think, be a more natural use of the under 19s players.
I love this rule, Ralph. I love this rule. We have more young players in the top division. If you look at certain squads, they have really old players, just to be honest. 12 de Octubre, even Libertad. If you look at Libertad, this is a discussion I have even with my friends here. I don't know if Roque Santa Cruz, players like Tacuara Cardoso could play in Brazil right now, could play in Argentina, just because of the rhythm of the game, the pace of it. But here they're stars. Here they're the best players in the tournament in some of these games. And I love to see young players, especially because we haven't been to the last World Cups, Roberto, and it's heartbroken. We need young players. We need to build up players to sell to Europe just to make this league even better and bigger. And unfortunately, we needed to do this to pretty much make the teams to put young players in their squads.
It's the obligation to really allow them to showcase themselves and allowed to be promoted into these teams. So it definitely makes a lot of sense when you put it there as we switch gears to what's been going on in the Copa Paraguay, because as I had mentioned beforehand, this is a competition that depending on which club you are, be it in the first or second division, your priorities are maybe not in the best shape, Fede. And going into you on this one, as we get the competition started in a couple days with all the big teams coming up, you don't see a lot of shocks and upsets, really. You see some of the same thing, and that's nothing in comparison to what we saw last year. So I think the changing of the guard is definitely expectant this season.
Yeah, I'm not liking the way the FA is organizing this competition, and especially because you're having the big teams now coming into this competition, and they're going to play pretty much in their home ground. When you thought that they were going to play neutral ground, that they were going to play maybe in the countryside also, just like I was saying, Cerro Porteño is playing in Ciudad del Este, and it's packed, it's full of people. Why not take the big teams there also for Copa Paraguay? I don't know why they're not making it happen. This is not the first time Copa Paraguay is happening. Maybe it is a budget thing. Maybe they don't have the money yet to do these kind of movement around the country. Maybe the big teams don't want nothing to do with moving around during the week because they want to practice in their home at home. I don't know what the reason to this situation is, but I'm not liking that Olimpia is going to play in their stadium against Sport Colonial, a team that's in the third, fourth division. And no, I'm not liking that. They always play there. You got to take them out of their comfort zone. You got to take them somewhere else. I think that's just an advantage for the big teams. And then, you had the draw also. There was a draw before before this, what is it, third phase of the tournament that we're going through. And you can see on one side of the bracket, the rivals that Cerro Porteño has, and there's not many big teams on that side. And then on the other side, you have Olimpia, and Olimpia have to face off against Libertad, Guarani to make it to the final. Those are teams that have already won the Copa Paraguay. Those are teams that have big squads. Even though they're not putting their top players to play Copa Paraguay, they have what it takes to make it to the final stages. So yeah, it is harder on one side than on the other. A lot of people are expecting for Cerro Porteño to make it to those final stages, and especially because they haven't won it yet, Ralph. So it is kind of an obligation also for Cerro Porteño. Olimpia won it, Libertad won it, Guarani did it. So hey, Cerro Porteño is running a little behind you.
That's true. It seems like it should be their turn this year, and they famously don't make finals, so people will be really looking out for them to finally make a final. Saying that twice. Yeah, we're in the stage now of the last 32. So the teams that are winning here are going into the last 16, and Libertad are the only big side that have played so far, and they kind of struggled to get past San Lorenzo. I think Tacuara Cardoso ended up getting the winner because Libertad has such this big squad, they could bring on some players. But we're still getting a few stories, a few surprises. Sportivo Luqueño, they're really trying to get back into Primera, so they're not really looking into this competition. So when they played General Caballero, not the General Caballero in Primera, but the one in third division from Ceballos Cue, they actually put a 45-year-old Cáceres Cañete, who used to be a great player at Luqueño. He played also in places like Guarani as well, but he's been coaching. I think he's coaching like the under-19s or the reserves or something. He's been around the club. But at 45 years old, they said, do you want to come and play a game? Because we're not going to put our first team in the Copa Paraguay. We need to focus on getting promotion. So he did. He got, I think, about 20, 30 minutes at the end of the game. They lost 1-0, but that wasn't a surprise, despite being the higher ranked team, because they didn't put a first team in there. And I think that's what we're seeing too, as Fede was mentioning, with this format, some of those kind of, I suppose, middling teams of like Intermedia, maybe the top of Primera B, they're not too focused on this because they've got bigger fish to fry. And I think what we might see is then this will end up being our big teams all kind of float to the top, as we've seen traditionally. All the finals have been two Primera teams, and it looks like we'll end up heading that way again.
Even though I think, Roberto, there's more prizes this time around for the champions or the teams that make it to the final stages. I think there's some money at stake, not much, but some money at least this time around. There was no money in the first two editions of this cup. And I think there's also a spot in the Sudamericana or something like that. So I think they need to start to give bigger prizes, right, to the team, so they put their best players in this cup. I do think money prize could be the big difference, especially for those small clubs. It could make the difference for them. We need those kind of things in this Copa Paraguay just to catch more attention. You need this tournament to get bigger and bigger by the year, Roberto.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it's definitely something that allows a bit more motivation, allows a lot more prestige in a way for the players to participate. And yeah, I think there is a lot that are going in there. Above all, it's a trophy. Who doesn't want to win silverware at the end of the day? So I completely get what both of you guys are saying. So we will definitely see what happens to them in this competition as we put a bow on another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.